So hello and welcome everyone. My name is Lindsay and I'm with the National Kids Yoga Conference. Today we are so excited to have Mandy Noa joining us. Mandy is the program director at Paint Love. We'll be hearing from Mandy soon about creativity, trauma, and stress, which is the topic for our August workshop. If you're interested in learning more, we hope you'll join us in August with Mandy and Laura, who's the executive director from Paint Love, for their workshop that the National Kids Yoga Conference is hosting called Creativity in the Face of Trauma and Stress. You can find out more about that workshop at kidsyogaconference.org. And for those who are joining us live today, you can type in the chat to let us know where you're joining in from and a little bit about yourself. We'd love to hear how you work with youth, if you're a teacher, a kids yoga teacher, a social worker, school counselor, or a parent, and what age group you work with. So I'm just gonna check the comments, so I'll let people start typing in and we'll come back to that. But again, let us know by typing in the comments how you share yoga and mindfulness education with kids. And if you have any questions for Mandy as we go along in our discussion, please drop them in the chat and we'll do our best to get to these. So let's see if we have. I am going to go ahead and welcome Mandy. Let me just unpin myself here. All right, there we go. Hi, Mandy, welcome.
Hi, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you with us. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us and to share about your work and to allow us to ask you some questions about trauma and stress.
Yeah.
It's such an important topic, especially as we're kind of transitioning towards the end of summer, coming into, depending where people are in the country, starting back up with the school year. And we know, especially for this past year, trauma and stress has been something that we've all experienced.
Yes, 100%.
So first off, we're really excited to partner with Paint Love because you all are also a nonprofit and you're serving Title I schools and youth experiencing poverty. And I personally love all the resources that you have available on the Paint Love website for people to check out. There's lots of good stuff there, so highly encourage people to check out your website for some ideas for some activities to incorporate into classes. So for those who may not be familiar with you or your work at Paint Love, can you share an introduction to yourself and your involvement as a kids yoga educator and then how you became involved with Paint Love?
Yeah, so Paint Love is a nonprofit based out of Atlanta, Georgia. We have been around since 2014. We've served over 15,000 kids in that time. So what we do is we partner with artists and nonprofits, and we bring in artists into those spaces, and we do art with kids in different forms of creative expression. And we do that through a social emotional learning lens. So we teach them how to regulate, how to be good people to themselves and to others through the arts. And we work with a lot of vulnerable populations. We work with kids who have had housing insecurity, kids who've lost family members and are struggling with grief and loss, kids who have been homeless, who have food insecurity. We work with a lot of Title I schools. And so the idea is providing, we believe that art is incredibly essential to us as humans. And so providing that opportunity, especially in under-resourced communities where that is not happening as much or as well as it could be. And so during the pandemic, you mentioned our website with our resources. During the pandemic, we weren't able to meet with kids in person. And so we noticed that people that were able to do that or virtually able to do that wanted to incorporate creative expression into their work. So we built curriculums and we have resources available for different topics for social emotional learning with kids so that you can take that into the space that you work in. And something we've learned about working with these kids who have faced a lot of adversity, and really at this point, any child, because we've all gone through a lot of intense stress this past 2 years, is that movement is so incredibly important. So 3 people on staff, including myself, are registered yoga teachers and yoga instructors. And so we started to incorporate movement into the art we make because, our thoughts and feelings and behaviors are all intermingled, and what we feel expresses itself in our bodies. And so teaching kids that level of self-awareness is something that we think is important and we're passionate about. But yeah, so I am the program director there. I've been there a while. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I have a mental health background, being a school social worker as well. And so I am a part of scheduling and working with partners to make sure that when we go into spaces with kids, we are honoring their stories and their experiences, and we're doing it well. Because as you all probably know, yoga and art can bring up some stuff for people. And so just making sure that we respect that and we know how to handle that is a huge part of my job.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Mandy. And I feel like you have such an interesting perspective working with kids as a kids yoga teacher, as a social worker, as a school social worker as well. And I know you're also play therapist in training. So I feel like you bring so many interesting perspectives into the work that you do. And I know many people within the kids yoga community, maybe teachers, maybe social workers as well, counselors. So we're really excited to have you here sharing. I just wanted to read some people who have left comments to say that they're joining in. So Audrey, hi Audrey from Silly Hearts Yoga for Kids. She's the owner. They're based in Carmel, Indiana, and she teaches yoga to children in school settings ages 1 to high school aged. And she recently received her certification for trauma-informed yoga for youth. And so I know Paint Love, I think you mentioned, has a trauma-informed approach. So we'll get into that in a little bit. So we're excited to have Audrey joining us. And then Karen just joined. Hi, Karen. Deshonda. Hi, Deshonda. She's from Richmond, Virginia. She teaches yoga at a residential treatment facility for adolescents who experience a lot of trauma. And she says, thank you for the opportunity to grow and learn. We have Amanda joining us. Hi, Amanda. So if you're just joining us, if you want to type in the chat where you're joining in from and how you teach yoga and mindfulness to youth, we'd love to hear from you. And then if anybody has any questions as we're going along, again, please drop them in the chat and we'll do our best to get to those. So Mandy, I'm going to add in a question for you. So I know you talked a little bit about yourself, but personal question. So since a lot of the work that you do is around creativity, I'm curious to hear from you. What's your personal favorite creative activity that you do in your own life to help with stress? Since I imagine as your role, you're maybe in a stressful position through your various responsibilities that you have caring for others.
Yeah, thanks for asking about self-care. I appreciate that. I probably I'm one of those people that doesn't have a niche. I just like to make things with whatever I have around. So one day I'm a doodler, like that. I will doodle in meetings and draw in meetings. So that helps me stay calm. If I had Play-Doh in my house, because I have a house like a child as an adult, like playing with Play-Doh, building things, really just taking space to create something is very important to my self-care. And to see working in mental health and social work, it's slow moving change. And so sometimes creating in that way and just building something helps me feel like accomplished and like I've made something. So yeah, that's my go-to. I mean, a stick in the grass and drawing in it, like that feels good some days.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you use what's around you kind of in the moment to maybe decide what
That
creativity.
just means I have like a way too many art supplies in my house from all my different hobbies. So yeah.
Yeah, and also what you shared about play. I think that as adults, it's so important for us, I think, especially as educators, as um, mental health workers, parents, that being able to find time for us to play too is equally important as being able to share these tools with the students that we're serving. Because it comes back to kind of our own practice of adding in play to be able to then teach those who we're working with. So we know that your workshop coming up in August is going to have that element to it of doing some art. So we're excited to kind of be able to play together while
Mhm.
also learning some new tools. So how does yoga, movement, and creative expression come together?
So this is a question that I could like go on and on about at its like physiological level and even greater. But I think all of them draw from some of our most primitive functions, you know, repetition, from rhythm, from movement and breath and expression. And I think all three intermingle play and creativity and imagination. And those are absolutely essential to us just moving forward to foreseeing our future and working toward that as a community and as an individual. They're all ways that we communicate with ourselves internally and externally. And they're just sort of a natural fit. And that's for all ages. And I know, like you mentioned, we often think that play is just for kids, but that is absolutely not true. And all three help us learn about our bodies and our connection to ourselves and also to the spaces we inhabit. So I think that they just go together so well. And we've learned that more and more as we've worked with different populations and seen how it's affected them.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I think again, it's like an important reminder that play is for all ages, right? I know somebody shared they were teaching like ages as young as 1 all the way to high school, and that um, just incorporating that play into classes. And I know that we hear so much from our community of kids yoga and mindfulness educators that creativity is something that they incorporate into their classes, whether that's I know at the conference that we just had in April, there was a whole um, creativity and writing workshop that was done. I know we hear from others that they're incorporating arts and crafts into their classes, painting, drawing. So again, just love the work that Paint Love is doing to kind of bring to bring those things together, um, and all the resources that you have to offer for some ideas that others can get. Um,
I think too, something to not forget is play with teenagers. That's something I'm really passionate about as a high school social worker. Is don't forget that the teenagers like to have fun too. I think sometimes we write them off as adults too quickly.
hmm,
Um, and so just even just using the language of let's play with this, let's try this. Will you um just go with me on this kind of, you know, and then let it opens a door for them to be more vulnerable than a teenager often wants to. So yeah.
yeah, because you share because I hear this sometimes like from people that are um, like how do you get buy-in maybe from like a teen or tween that is like wants to be treated like an adult, but then what's a tip that you could share with others as to like how they could um I guess initiate the play into what they're doing if they might have teens who think that they're maybe more
So
like treated like a
ways to get older one of the golden ways to get older kids to do things is to tell them, and this is probably true, that you're testing out something for a younger population. So like, oh, I've got this new board game, because games are really great with working with teenagers. Let's try this out because I want to see if it'll work with others. Sort of like giving them power in deciding if it's good or not. That will often get the teenagers bought in.
Thanks for sharing that tip. I think just hit on what you said of like giving them that sense of power and like empowering them to kind of make the choice for sharing their thoughts and giving them a voice. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to welcome. We had a couple other people that have typed in. We have Ruth from Core Yoga for Youth joining from New Jersey, and she goes into elementary schools teaching yoga and mindfulness. So again, if you're joining, you can type in, let us introduce yourself. And if you have any questions for Mandy, just type them in the chat. Kind of moving on to our next question for you. So I know a big part of what Paint Love offers is a trauma-informed model. So just kind of switching gears to talking about trauma, why do you think it's important to teach from a trauma-informed lens?
Well, from our history with it, we were going, again, I'll reiterate, we work with really vulnerable populations. And so going into those spaces and making art and moving even is a very vulnerable and heart-opening experience. And so we believe it's important and created this model with a lot of research and guidance and our own personal experience and knowledge, because we wanted to go into those spaces and respect the kids' stories and the kids' experiences, and also know how to handle them well, and how to make sure that when kids are moving and creating, we are doing it in the most impactful and safe way. Do no harm is sort of the mantra, and we think that doing these things from a trauma-informed lens is going to help us do no harm. And I think that is going to be especially important as we maybe move into the normal, into fall, as schools open back up, and we just see how kids function in this new environment, and after they've gone through so much grief and loss and stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do you have a tip for teachers as to maybe how they can be more trauma informed in their teachings, like either in a classroom setting or private settings?
Yeah, I would say there are a lot of tips, but my main tip would be one, to build a relationship with the kids and the kids that you work with, and to get to know their stories, and to learn to honor their stories in whatever you're doing, even if it's like coloring a coloring sheet. Just not placing your own story and narrative on them, but letting them share who they are through what you're doing, and just respecting that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that tip. Sometimes I think it's important for us to remind ourselves of the importance of mindful listening, right? To give them the space to share, and us just be listening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah.
And I know, and looking through, I've loved looking through your website. I'm going to go back to the resources again, because in a lot of the activities that you've posted that are free, not only are you giving the art supplies and directions for how to do it, but also the discussion piece, like adding in those questions for discussion about
Mm-hmm.
the art activity, which I think is so amazing to have those kind of guiding questions. Again, like just to go back to what you were saying, of like giving them the space, and I imagine it's maybe easier to answer those questions after they've done something creative.
Yeah, I think that a lot of movement and art and expression activities can help empower some really tough conversations that we need to be having with kids, about themselves and what's going on around them. Kids are not immune to just the world and how it's going, and the mental health of those around them and themselves. And so making sure that you have those conversations, and artistic expression and movement help us do that and get into a space where we're able to mindfully listen with each other.
Mhm. I'm going to spring another question on you that is just coming to mind because we had somebody ask this at a previous workshop. Was when we're talking about social emotional learning, we're talking about emotions. Like you mentioned, we're having maybe some tough conversations or discussing some tough topics. So for those who are watching who may not be social workers or have a background in therapy and who may just be wearing the hat of an educator or a kids yoga teacher, I think one of the questions that came up was, when addressing some of these topics, how do you not like play there, like be in the therapist role but still have these? So I'm wondering if maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I think my best advice to first off, I want to say that I really love and appreciate that person for asking that question, just purely for the boundaries of it. Like, I'm not skilled in this, so I don't want to go that far. But I think you, whoever are doing as an adult teacher, you still have some influence and some good things to say. So I would say if something does come up where you naturally feel like you're out of your realm of knowledge, then pass it on to the parent or whoever you're coordinating with in that space. But I don't want that to make anyone afraid of asking questions and having kids name their feelings and tell their stories, because you will know in your gut, hopefully, like, this is out of my realm of expertise. As another human being and an adult, I know how that I deal with this, so I could share that maybe. And this is helpful. But if a kid's harming themselves or someone else, or this seems like it really needs some long-term TLC, not being afraid to give that to the other person involved that would be more experienced.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think you hit on some really important things of being able to know that there are other people who do have that knowledge and experience to pass it on to, if it's at that level where somebody else needs to handle it and it's outside of our knowledge. And so
Mm-hmm.
that,
But again, don't be afraid to have conversations. Sometimes it is scary to have tough conversations, but it's really important and unifying and helps build relationships. So,
yeah, and I feel like especially maybe it's more so with American culture, is that the idea of talking about feelings and emotions is not something that is maybe as common as other cultures.
mhm.
So I think there's also kind of like that maybe stigma that goes along with it, that when we're talking about feelings or emotions, sometimes we're associating that maybe with
Yeah. And like how powerful it is, just
conversation.
as you, yeah, as a yoga instructor, or art teacher, whatever, just bringing it up and having kids name their feelings, and you're helping alleviate that stigma, just in those simple actions. Mhm.
Thanks for sharing. I'm just going to check the chat. I'm just welcoming some other people who are joining. We have Lori, who's getting her trauma informed yoga and SEL certification, and her vision is to take this to many children communities. And she's based in Kansas City, Missouri. So thanks for joining us, and thank you to everyone watching. Again, you can type in where you're joining from and how you teach kids. And if you have any questions for Mandy, go ahead and drop them in the chat, and we'll do our best to get to those. But I know we only have a couple more minutes together, so am just, maybe we might have time for one more question. Can you share your favorite creativity activity to do with kids, and what age group it's for?
So this is an activity that I love doing with kids, and it just requires some really simple supplies, and it is drawing your breath. And so this can be done with any age group. So don't worry about, having to adapt it, but you'll just take watercolor paper and a white crayon, and you'll have maybe play some calming music, and maybe after a flow that really focuses on your breath, you'll have the kids take the white crayon on the white paper and just draw what feels good. Draw their breath, have them flow in and out as they move. They can draw patterns, and naturally you won't be able to see that white crayon on the white paper too well. But then you'll take your watercolors and just go over that, and the white crayon resists the watercolor, and so your breath will appear. I wish I had an example, but this is a really cool project to talk about how our breath is always with us. Um, how you can't necessarily see it, but how important it is. This is a project that often kids feel calm after they've done it. So I give about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes to do that first part with the white crayon, and then 10, 15 minutes, maybe even more, to play with the watercolor on top. And again, some good conversations come out of that. And then talking about how some simple activities like this can help us regulate our emotions.
I love that. I used that activity for the first time last summer as part of a camp that I was working with, and they had given instructions for how to do that, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
yeah
it's a good one.
Are there instructions for that on the Paint Love website by chance?
Yes, there's a curriculum called Calming, Projects for Calming and Regulation, I believe is the name of it. It's definitely calming. And it's in there. And there are some other projects very similar to that in that curriculum.
Okay, I'm just gonna type in. So Project for Calming and Regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm just gonna type that in the chat so people can access that. And then I'm just gonna see if there's anybody, if anyone has a question. All right, I don't think I see any. Well, before we come to a close, Mandy, can you share a little bit about where people can learn more about Paint Love and the resources that you have available? And while you're sharing, I'll drop that in the chat too.
Yeah, so follow us on social media at Paint Love. You can visit our website, www.paintlove.org. We've got those curriculums in the shop that are available to you. Once you download those curriculums, you're entered into a list. And so once a month, we send out, at the beginning of the month, we send out an SEL and art email. And so that email has, any of those like major dates that we celebrate in that month. So in August is like Friendship Day. May was Children's Mental Health Week. And so we have art activities based on those. And we've also got yoga resources. So flows and journal prompts and videos that you can watch yourself and teach, or you can use to teach another group. But those come out once a month. And if you're interested in chatting and just about the work that you do, or any way we can partner, you can email me at mandy@paintlove.org. Also, if you're interested in any of the previous art and SEL lessons, hopefully we'll have those on the website by the end of this year. But if you want copies of those emails from spring and summer, early winter, then you can email me and I can send those links to you.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much, Mandy. I was typing all that away in the chat for anybody watching. That'll be in the comments, so you can check out all those resources that Mandy just shared along with her email addresses in the chat as well. Thank you, Mandy, so much. Thank you and your team for all that you're doing to bring accessibility to communities through the trauma-informed arts programs that you all offer. We look forward to having you back in August. So just in a few weeks, we'll be joined by you and Laura Shaw, who's the executive director at Paint Love. And you can learn more about that workshop again at kidsyogaconference.org. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who tuned in and shared about your work with kids. And We look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks. Mandy, thanks again for your time.
Thanks everyone for coming.